Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. I'm Gavin Schall, and today I'm lucky enough to be joined by Prez of Strickland to discuss a bevy of breaking Knicks news. Obi Toppin is injured. Cam Reddish is out of the rotation. He might be back in the rotation. Immanuel Quickley could get dealt as well. RJ Barrett is having a crisis in terms of his ability to pass the basketball. We break it all down right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, and today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. And we want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. We're now available on all platforms, and that includes, and you know this, if you see my smiling face on YouTube. So certainly go check us out there. Throw us a subscription. Throw us a comment, whether it's funny, whether it's insightful, even if it's a little critical. You know, I can handle it. I need more of that in my life. I think I'm riding a little too high lately. I need to be brought down a peg. But luckily that will not happen today because we have one of the best minds covering this Knicks team joining us on the podcast in Prez. For those of you who have been longtime listeners, every episode he comes on is an absolute banger. And this one, which was recorded before I'm saying this, is no exception. He's incredibly insightful, just exceptionally smart about the game, and very, very good at explaining those insights. So without further ado, let's get into it right now with Prez. All right, guys, as promised, we are lucky enough to be joined by the co-host of the Strickland podcast, the co-host of the fantastic Draft Strickland podcast that I've just been informed returned today. So certainly go check that out. It is our guy, Prez. Prez, how's it going, man? Outside of the bummer news we got right as we were about to record that Obi Toppin has a non-displaced fracture. How are you doing outside of that?
Man, I guess it could be worse. So, it's definitely not good though. And I know different Knicks fans have had we've all had a lot of emotions lately, and things have been a little angsty in the world of Knicks Twitter and Knicks fandom. But me personally, I've had pretty good vibes from the last two games, the last two wins. So this Obi stuff is really a bummer. I hope he comes out of this well and good.
Well, you know, we might get some Jericho Sims, Isaiah Hartenstein minutes. That has to cheer you up, right?
Yeah. I'm sure it would cheer up Mike Woodson and David Fizdale.
They'll just start attending every game as fans and just
exactly.
Like, you know what? The East is big, man. The East is big. But yeah, let's talk Obi. So he this is from the famous account In Streak Closed, which is run by Jeff Stotts. He noted that Obi's the second player to suffer this injury this year. Zach Collins of the Spurs had it and missed 10 games or 21 days. On average, players miss about 16 games with this injury. And it's particularly awkward because initially how we're going to open this podcast was talking about Cam Reddish. So maybe there's a world where Cam breaks back into the rotation now, but I'm gonna ask you to combine these two narratives right now. What was your reaction to Cam being benched? Because I know you're a big Deuce McBride guy, but I guess even considering that, did you think there was room for both of them? Did you think Cam had earned a spot? And do you think he'll get a second chance now that Obi's out for a little bit?
Yeah, all really good questions. I think there's definitely was room for both of them, right? Like, I'm happy that Rose has been turned into a bench coach of sorts along with Fournier. And there was a time, if we had done that earlier, where we could have probably fit minutes for both of them. That being said, I think a lot of Knicks fans, myself included, were so overjoyed with Cam's development from somebody who frankly looked like they might be out of the league to a solid rotation player, that we didn't really stop to think of like how that stacks up to other options, right? Like Deuce. And I'm, like you said, much higher on Deuce than others. So for other folks who don't really think about Deuce much, it's probably more egregious to take him out of the rotation. But to me, I guess the thing is, like, yeah, we needed to improve our defense, but on the whole, the package of things Deuce offers really fits what this team needs a lot more than Cam,
Mm.
which kind of stinks for Cam, but that's the way it goes, right? Like, guys get hurt and then other guys get opportunities to fill in. And the same thing, that's how Cam benefited, right? He wasn't playing because Tibbs, not a fan. There were injuries to Grimes, who was almost certainly going to take the spot that he eventually took back later. And he got to flourish, and then Cam got hurt, which is not the first time, right? That's pretty much a yearly thing now. He's not injury prone, but he's not injury prone. And, Grimes' emergence means that whoever was filling those Cam minutes was going to have a bench role, and Deuce took advantage of that over the last 2 games, and he's been fantastic. And, I talked about this on Pod Strickland, but like, the biggest weaknesses of this team in no particular order are defense, rebounding, connective ball movement, quick decisions, whatever you want to kind of call all of that type of stuff. And those are all things Deuce is good at. We're actually not bad at offense. We could shoot better for sure, but we're not like a awful offense like we are an awful defense. And, you see it in what happens when all of a sudden you have 3 perimeter defenders who are crazy and you can throw out different combinations of them for the whole game rather than just like you only have 2 to rely on. That's a big difference. And, there's other things that I think people overlooked because it's so cool to see Cam develop. Like, for example, he's a horrible rebounder and passer.
Yeah.
Like, that's just like people don't, like, he's really, really, truly atrociously bad at those things. And that's not even like, he's not a bum. He's still a very solid. He's going to go somewhere probably in a trade. He might even play because of this Obi injury.
Yeah, right.
And he's really good at certain things like getting to the rim off closeouts. But getting to the rim is like the one thing on offense that the Knicks were already good at. Jalen Brunson does that literally more than anybody in the league. Julius Randle does that a ton. RJ, for all his struggles, still does that a ton. At least the getting there part. I don't know about the scoring part, but it's and then obviously you have our centers parked there in the paint at the rim most of the time. So I think it was definitely a little bit messy in terms of how it unfolded, but like, if the name of the game is getting Tibbs, a stubborn coach, to somehow arrive at optimizing our players, like, we're a lot closer to that now than we were a week ago, in my opinion.
Yeah, it feels like a very strange scale to grade on, but also it's like, oh, you're letting the bad guy win, and it's like, all right, but like, we also win when the bad guy wins in this scenario. But I'm with you to some extent. I think it's certainly hard for me to separate the idea of Cam from the reality, and like, I always, like, just in my head while you were talking, I was like, yeah, but like, I watched him torch the Grizzlies on opening night, and you're just seeing, I mean, some of his like footwork in the lane, like some of, like, I mean, he has some of the best finishes you'll ever see, like when he has those insanely acrobatic up and unders. And the fact is, like, to your point, statistically, like, it's hard to argue that he hasn't been a good player this year. I think it was a boxing one I just saw it tweeted out, but in games where he played over 20 minutes this year, which was 9 games, averaging 13 points, shooting 55% from the field, 40% from 3, 92% from the line, 2 rebounds, 1.5 steals, 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. Like there is a good player in there. And I think, to me, the limiting factor there in some ways is RJ's presence on this team, where there just isn't a spot for him because of RJ. And I've kind of gone back and forth on it. And I'd be curious to get your opinion, where, like, on one hand, I would say, like you look at the stats, like there's no question, right? Cam's been the better player offensively. Like, defensively, he is dramatically better, where RJ has been an unmitigated disaster for most of this year. But am I underrating what RJ does with his ability to just, like, to attack a static defense when Cam is really only effective against closeouts? And even if RJ is inefficient, it's kind of the same premise that the Knicks had all of last year, where there's value in someone just soaking up those possessions, and someone who can draw 2, even if they're not always making the right passes out of those situations. or would you say like contract, pedigree, draft status, face of the franchiseness aside, like in a perfect world, like RJ would be the one sitting right now and the Knicks would be a better team for Cam playing? All right, guys, we'll be back in just a sec to continue talking RJ Barrett's development, where it's gone off the rails and how it can get back on track. But first, if your professional life has gone off the rails, there's only one place to go, and that is LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And now I've never been lucky enough to be in the privileged position of hiring someone. If you guys keep listening, maybe someday we'll be there with the podcast. I would love to have an intern at some point, but I use LinkedIn as kind of the ultimate connections tool. Like I was recently in Philadelphia working a Sixers game, and I was lucky enough to meet some people who like potentially could really help me out with career aspirations. And LinkedIn is the only place I thought to go to connect with them after and learn a little bit more about what they do and how it could help my professional future. So head to LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
I think it's a little bit of both. Like, RJ has been stinking up the joint on both ends. Ain't no two ways about it. Even compared to Cam, who's a bench player. I've seen some people call him a starting caliber wing. Relax, guys. No starting caliber wing on a good team is a historically bad passer and rebounder. That being said, like, there's an argument that on many of the games he's been better than RJ. But if you're committing to player development, unfortunately, that means you actually have to commit to it through the rough patches, not just when it's all good. And, a lot of that is probably on RJ. Some of that is on coaches getting him to buy in and change habits, get him to start passing the ball once in the blue moon. How about that? Or not closing out like a fifth grader. So, there's a lot of stuff we can do. But you have to work through some of these rough patches, particularly with guys you're invested in, like RJ, who we paid. And, there's a lot of gray area between sit him for Cam and, give him 35 minutes a game. And this is the way, to your point, where you would want them to use both of them a little bit, right? Maybe RJ doesn't play 35 minutes. Maybe he plays 28 and Cam plays 15 or something like that. Like, does Cam deserve more? Sure. Maybe, probably. On this team, we're not that good, but like, you can't just kick him to the curb. You got to work through it. Like, that's the only way to get out of the slumps is, and it's work through it, right? It's not just shoot through it, which is what RJ seems to think the problem is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's another reason why there's a lot of angst among the fan base, because there doesn't seem to ever be accountability measures for RJ and Julius Randle when they're doing bad. But then other guys, right? Like Cam, it was almost like a flash. Like, he got injured and he had a couple bad games where he might have been pressing, and then all of a sudden he might be a Laker tomorrow for all I know. Like, wow, that escalated quickly. Meanwhile, these guys can, I was gonna say a bad word, but they can mess around for months and still get 33 minutes a game or whatever. So like, I get the anger for sure.
Yeah, we were going to touch on it a little later, but how would you fix the RJ situation? I saw on Twitter yesterday you were talking about just a coach that could compel him to pass out of drives a little bit more often, and that's been probably even more so than the continued poor shooting, the biggest disappointment for me that you saw. I think it was Drew Hanlon like tweeting out all summer about how they were working with RJ on those cross court reads, and you could clip. I mean, going back to literally the first 10 games of his rookie year, him making spectacular reads, like zipping the ball across the court on a drive after drawing two defenders. And what's so frustrating is that he has those moments and he has those flashes within him, but there hasn't been any kind of consistency, and it's almost gotten worse. I mean, even last night, end of the first quarter, he had that play where Deuce was just wide open under the basket with a second left in the quarter, and it took RJ something like 4 seconds to register it. And then the pass ended up getting deflected and knocked away. So do you think that is that something inherent in RJ that he's not seeing that, or is it selfishness? Because we've heard him be self-aware about in the past. Last year, he was like, yeah, I got to make that pass a little bit more. And I got to imagine Tibbs is like Clockwork Orange style, making him watch film of all the times he doesn't make those passes. But what do you see, and what do you think the keys are to getting that on track and his season and career on track as a whole?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The passing, to me, the passing is the biggest, like, that's like the golden goose to me more than everything else. Because everything else we've seen him do with some level of consistency. Like, we've seen him shoot well for like a season and a half. We've seen him be solid defender, an important part of a top 5 defense. We've seen that, right? Like, his defense has been the most harmful part of his game to me this season by a lot. The offense is annoying and is frustrating. But like you articulated, there is some value to just hammering the paint and just getting free throws. Like, that's our team's identity on offense, is really just hammering the paint. And it might be ugly, but he's a part of that. But the defense, that was just way out of left field. I didn't think he was gonna become some, OG Anunoby type defender, but I didn't think he would regress. And I don't know if it's a combination of weight gain or lack of focus or lingering injury or a mix of all of the above. Because there's a combination of, like, he feels heavy-footed when you watch him, and the reactions seem a tick too late, and then the technique is really bad on top of that. And the technique part is probably the most baffling part of all, because he's had the best basketball education you can have. Like, I'm 100% sure he knows how to do a correct closeout, right? It just doesn't happen. But as far as how do you fix it, I don't know. For the defense, it really depends on what's causing it. And sitting here on the computer, I don't know if is it buy-in? Is it something physical? Is it weight gain? Because you don't want him to just go like, wrestler, NCAA wrestler style, and just puke up like 10 pounds to lose weight. This stuff takes time too. Yeah. So, maybe it's injury and he needs to rest. Maybe it's just he's tuning Tibbs out and he's over it. And in that case, like, I wish he would not be over it, but maybe that's another reason to get Tibbs out of there. Maybe he'll see Quentin and Deuce and IQ and even Julius flying around, and he'll decide maybe I should do that too. Like, I have no idea. For the passing though, I think that's less of a you can't fix it right now thing. That takes a more radically different shift in his mindset. Like you said, he's always had the reads. I'll never forget him having 11 assists versus, I forget, who was it?
Was it the Rockets? I don't know.
I'm talking about at Duke in March Madness.
At Duke. Oh, yeah. Okay.
He had a game
because he had a game the first 10 games of his career where he had something like that.
Yeah, he's he's always shown the flashes, and I forget who he played. I want to say it was Virginia Tech, and he wasn't shooting well, and he's just like, all right, I'm going to pass to all these guys, right? Jones and one of the Plumlees and Zion and everybody. And he ended up with 11 assists, which he's never done in the NBA. And I don't know, it would take, his identity is one of a scorer and one of somebody with a chip on his shoulder who doesn't have, he's talked about, like, he knows he doesn't have the same athletic gifts as other guys. And he's always had to work. And despite that, he's always been a bucket, right? Yeah. And, it might not be the prettiest cross between Hezzy, like, mixtape ever that you'll see, but the guy's a scorer. And when he's losing that, it's easy to, we've seen it with Julius last year. Like, it's easy for a pro whose identity is hung up in one thing to, if they lose that, to be like, I have to, this is crazy. I have to get it back, right? Like, this is my thing, and now it's gone. Like, yeah, I got to prove that I can do this. And they just double down instead of figuring out, the less is more approach, which is, I think, where the task lies with whoever's around him, whether it's coaches, family, friends, whoever.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to get resolved to the extent that we want it to this season. Because I'm just, when you were talking about the physical stuff, I was thinking about Mitchell Robinson last year, and I was like, oh, that took a while to,
Yeah.
for him to like get, like, it took him missing like 30 games for him to look more athletic again. And again, I wonder if, I mean, I don't know, that's not going to happen. And to your point on the buy-in, like, I wonder if it is a new coach, like it's just sort of mystifying to see someone that young whose identity was at least, like, maybe it was good PR, but seemingly was built around hard work and out hustling everyone, to your point, out competing everyone, just being a killer. Like, you don't get the Maple Mamba nickname without having some of that in you. And it just, for whatever reason, hasn't fully been there. I want to continue on the young guys, because we were, well, you and Ariel actually were talking about this a little bit last night, where it's really easy to get excited about that group. I mean, Deuce and Grimes, obviously the newcomers to this team, but them getting to play with IQ and Obi and Isaiah Hartenstein feels like he is a new lease on life playing with those guys. And that lineup, I mean, Deuce in general, a year after, I think he was something like plus 40 per 100 possessions, or crazy last year. And this year I'm on cleaning the glass, and his plus minus is just under 23 points per 100 possessions, which is nuts. Like, the first like 6 most used lineup season are plus 19, plus 29, plus 19, plus 37.5, and this is just over 11 possessions, but plus 100. So that is very, very good, obviously, and it seems like it is infectious when those guys are out there, and the level of effort they draw out of everyone else. But I'm curious about those bench units in particular, because I do think you lose a little bit of pop without Reddish in there, and now with no Obi, who I don't know about you, I was really excited to get to see him handle the ball a little bit more with those groups, and maybe be used as a dive big a little bit more, like playing with
God forbid we use him like how he was used when he was player of the year.
No, that wouldn't make any sense. That's crazy. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what the hope was with those lineups, and with the 9-man rotation. Like, I thought his role would get a little bit more clarified, even just before. I mean, not really last game, because he only played 8 minutes, but the 2 games before that, I thought he was attacking the basket in a way we hadn't really seen since the first few games of the year. But now that he's hurt, how do you think the Knicks get more offense out of those lineups? And maybe this neatly ties everything together, because it seems like Tibbs' initial response on Obi's injury was, all right, maybe we'll try RJ at the 4 a little bit more, so he could be the replacement in that lineup.
Yeah, it's interesting. That bench unit, for all its talents, beyond IQ running a pick and roll with whoever is a big, they don't have much creation juice. I think that's one reason why you saw Tibbs quickly sub out the other starters and leave Julius in with them in the second quarter, because he knows that Julius can make up for some of that, and those guys can cover for some of his deficiencies. So good job, Tibbs, on not making dumb rotations for once. But in general, the problem is still there, and I don't think Cam. I think Obi would offer a little more help than Cam if he did things other than stand in the corner, which is Obi's job this year, unfortunately, and occasionally like run to the hoop and dunk it.
He's great at that.
Yeah. Cam, you don't really want to expand Cam's role beyond closeout attacker, because that's when you get into like old Cam shenanigans where he's trying to, cross people up, and I feel like he falls over half the time. And
dude, he had a bad one against Dallas. Like that might have been the nail in the coffin for him.
Yeah, it's like when you're playing 2K and you try to do crossovers with a big, and the game's like, nope, you're not allowed to, and you just fumble the ball.
Yeah.
I don't think Cam is well positioned to fill that void. To say nothing of his rebounding, which is he's extremely ill-equipped to play power forward in that sense, even though he can defend guys because he's large. So RJ, if RJ could commit to moving the ball, I think you could give RJ a screen, and versus other bench units, it'll probably be a little easier for him to score, and definitely easy for him to pass. Like we saw Julius drive and hit Grimes several times. It's the same principle. But the real thing that I wish they would do that would solve all of this perfectly neatly like a bow is actually use Isaiah Hartenstein for how, the Clippers used him when he was awesome last year. Like the guy, this was literally his role on the Clippers, was bench offense hub, just doing dribble handoffs and hitting cutters and stuff like that. And you have guys who do that, right? Like Grimes and IQ and Deuce move. Like I remember that one as preseason, so grains of salt and all that. But like they did Isaiah Hartenstein like elbow passer for like a preseason game or two, and him and Deuce had great chemistry with it. Deuce is a good cutter, not as good as Grimes because Grimes is really good, but like you can solve a lot of problems versus opposing bench units if you just work off a Hartenstein. Will that happen? I have no idea. I think it'll be really interesting to see if Cam gets reinserted into the rotation or if they just agree it's best to not reignite that flame and let RJ and Julius kind of handle that. But again, they don't really have much depth in terms of 3s and 4s, so it's pretty much either give RJ minutes there, and the good news is Tibbs doesn't have problems giving RJ minutes, or bring Cam back. And I this team and this coach are not shy about just hanging on to guys and bringing them in and out of the rotation. So despite all this, I actually wouldn't be surprised if they were like, okay, Cam, like you're right back in there. We're a business. You're a because Cam is, he's very professional about all this. I think he may have been pressing the last 2 games, but you see it when they talk to him after the game. He's like, man, y'all know more than me about this, even though that's probably not true. But so we'll see.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on Hartenstein. It's kind of what Deuce was saying post game, where that type of ball movement becomes contagious, and I think it's particularly contagious when you have 5 guys who can pass. And I think this has been true throughout RJ's career. My favorite minutes from him are typically when he gets those stretches with the bench, and I think he starts buying into playing that way again. And it's kind of that old adage of like guys realizing, oh wait, this is fun. This is kind of how basketball should be played. And it also just like it not only gets guys buckets, but Hartenstein's ability to just kickstart sequences by seeing 2 passes ahead. Like we saw last night, it was actually with Mitchin, but Grimes, it was late first quarter. Grimes missed the 3. Mitch got the rebound, passed it to Grimes, who was cutting right to the rim, and then Grimes zipped it right back to Mitch. And to me, that's kind of Grimes' superpower, is just how quick of a decision maker he is, and that can compensate for not that Grimes is obviously he's pretty explosive attacking a closeout, but for someone who kind of like Cam, like at this point in his career isn't taking guys one-on-one in static situations off the dribble, you almost replicate some of that when he gets a step on a cut. Hard passes it to him. Someone else is moving off the ball, and Grimes can just make that decision fast and then keep on moving. To me, that is sort of the most fun version of this team. And I think you have guys in Deuce and IQ who can similarly make those types of decisions. And I think that could be the best thing in the world for RJ, to your point on like, it's almost like you talk about people making life changes and like having like different neural pathways. Like I'm going down a whole rabbit hole here, but like that could, I think, accelerate that for RJ Barrett a little bit. And I saw the other thing, Prez, when you were talking about that lineup in particular, and to be fair, despite the apparent lack of offense, and I was surprised when I looked this up, that lineup I'm on cleaning the glass. They've scored 123.8 points per 100 possessions so far, which would be 98th percentile in the NBA. That's over 21 possessions. So it's a really small sample size. And I guess it was with one other guy in where they went 4 minutes without scoring against the Cavs. So clearly there's stuff to work on there, but there's also there are positives as well. But the other thing I was trying to get to, and then I distracted myself. The other thing you were talking about on Twitter yesterday was 3-point rate could go up for that lineup, and that would make a significant difference. And I'm sure for someone like Deuce in particular, I just want to see him fire away, because he's 2 for 17 from 3 this year, and that's coming off a G League season where he was 42% on 8 attempts per game. He was an insane shooter. So can you explain why you think that might be a solution?
Well, it's common with all of them, except for Grimes and Obi. They've been getting them up this season with the best of them. But Deuce, you could tell he's a little gun shy, and he would much rather do connector stuff than put him up. He definitely does not. He has no interest in taking early shot clock attempts. He had one possession versus the Cavs where he got the ball in a rotation and he was like on the 3-point line on the right wing, and Kevin Love was between him and the hoop, and Kevin Love was like maybe 6-7 feet outside of the hoop, and he drove towards Kevin Love, and Kevin Love got ready for the charge because that's the only way Kevin Love can defend guys 20 years younger than him. He knows that. But Deuce, that was enough to deter Deuce. And I was like, no, Deuce, it's Kevin Love. You're allowed to shoot it. It doesn't even if it's a floater, like, but we saw some flashes. Like Deuce randomly went up, like cut and went up for a dunk yesterday versus the Hawks. And he got his dunk attempt absolutely punched, but good energy, good attempt. And, he made a 3 there at the end. So maybe my hope as a huge Deuce fan is just that shakes loose some of that shooting. Because he doesn't need to put him up like Grimes or anything, but you gotta shoot him sometimes. I'm much more worried. I think he's a great shooter. I think he hasn't shot well in the NBA this year or last year. He shot well in the G League. He shot well in college. I'm gonna just stick with the stats, even though the small sample size numbers are pretty gross for him. So I'm confident that if he shoots, that thing will go in, but he has to shoot. And for IQ, he's very much bought into the identity of this team as like, oh, we got to pressure the rim, especially now that he's stronger and faster and can pressure the rim, which is something that he wasn't able to do when he came into the NBA. So a lot of the times he'll pass up open or semi-contested looks in favor of driving. And, he's gifted enough to be fine doing that a lot of the time because he can drive and float, he can drive and layup, he can drive and kick. He's capable of all of that. But sometimes I'm just like, you got to put it up. Like I watch other teams and just 3-point rates around the league are so crazy. And if you have good shooters who aren't putting them up, it takes you basically have to be like Jalen Brunson to be efficient enough inside the arc to offset that. So it's something Tibbs has talked about. And I think it's one of the reasons why this is like a tangent, but it's one of the reasons why you see Julius putting him up, because that 3-point volume has to come from somewhere on every team. And it's not going to come from Brunson. It's not going to come from Mitch. RJ's solid in terms of volume, so you'll get some help from him. Grimes, thankfully, is a turbo boost in terms of 3-point volume, which is one of the reasons why he fits so well and why Evan fit so well last year on offense anyway. So, yeah, we need on that bench unit, if IQ and Deuce can take some early clock 3, or just like if you're open, shoot it. It's a statistically good shot for good shooters. And they just got to let that thing go.
Yeah. IQ was mystifying to me earlier this year. Where we almost saw him. I mean, it was kind of a backtrack to at points his rookie season, early in his second season, where he was just a little gun shy, and it's been seemingly 3 years of the coaching staff like kind of driving it into his head, like, hey, you got to it doesn't matter if it's 25 to 30 feet, you got to fire. And
he's never taken any of those 30-footers this year. It feels like.
It's gone. Yeah. And there used to just be so much more confidence in his ability to do it off of a dribble. And even now, like generally when he's taking them, it's because he's getting a really hard closeout and he's using, I think it was you who pointed out that his pump fake doesn't really look anything like his shot, but it's still about as effective as any in the league.
Which still works somehow.
It's a
People
fantastic
still fear it.
Yeah, he's got people fly by because he does have that reputation. There's that perception around the NBA that he's that type of shooter, even if he hasn't totally been that guy since his rookie year. But I'm with you. I think he needs to up the volume. I'm just curious what you think will open up for him getting to play primarily on the ball now that Derrick Rose is out of the rotation. And my preseason theory on that was like, oh, this is the best thing in the world for him. He got the year of experience without Derrick Rose. Mm-hmm. And now you're like, maybe this is a warped analogy that doesn't make any sense, but now you're putting like the big kid like back with the training wheels, like, oh, he's going to dominate with the training wheels now. Like the degree of difficulty is turned down to 1,000,000, and it's more like it's like in Dragon Ball Z where they train with a weighted vest, kind of like Piccolo's clothes. And I thought that was kind of going to be the end result for him. And it wasn't that at all. Like it didn't seem like he knew like when to attack, when not to attack. And instead of being hyper efficient, like you got someone who was super indecisive. So do you think Rose being out of the rotation will, and I guess already has like clarified that for a little bit for him?
I don't. And it's because I think he's comfortable playing point guard now and running the offense, but his 3-point rate is down to 7.8 per 100, that would be low for RJ Barrett, much less a shooter of Quickley's talents. He was at 11 last year, 12 the year before, something double digits in college, and we know he's a gifted shooter. Like you can't, like, it just shows, like, normally if you look at guys who are smaller guards and are talented shooters, normally if they don't put up double digit threes per 100, they don't have good impact stats. IQ is the exception because he's just so insanely good at defense that, you know, it's fine, even though his offense is rough. Like Malik Monk had his breakthrough when he broke through with the Lakers, and the last like quarter or third of his season with the Hornets before that, he started putting up threes, double digit threes per 100. And all of a sudden he had the first positive plus minus of his career. And it's because that stuff impacts the game in a major way in the modern NBA. And like I was saying before about Deuce, it's not even always about accuracy. It's just the math of it and the threat. Like, you know, you see it with teams, like the most supercharged version of this is Boston, where everyone puts them up and everyone's accurate. And now they have the best offense of all time, apparently. Yeah. So, you know, I don't know. Like we saw the fourth quarter, even though the game was well out of hand versus the Hawks, I think that was a microcosm. He was in there running the offense, but he just wasn't shooting threes. He was trying to drive all the time and score and draw fouls and pass, which is fine in a vacuum, but he needs to shoot, whether that's off the catch or off the dribble more or from the line or from behind the line. Like, I don't know how you get him to do that other than just asking him to do that. Like the most improved player Randall year, like after the All-Star break, Reggie Bullock had a similar transition where like after the break he put up like 11, 12 threes per 100, and before it was single digits. So, you know, we've seen players even on this team make that change. So, but it's just weird. Like, I don't know how this stuff works, man, but I need him to shoot it.
Yeah. I mean, the weird thing is that he's done it before, right? Because I mean, over the last 15 years of NBA basketball, we've seen with like stodgy old players and like probably like guys in the analytics department, like showing them the numbers and be like, hey, you should be taking 12 of these. And they're like, you're crazy. Like, I can't shoot 12 threes. It's like, no, we really haven't hit the upper limit yet. You just keep taking more. And it's strange for someone who is newer to the league and has literally done it before to have suffered that crisis in confidence, especially when, like, I mean, as much as his minutes have kind of been screwed around with at points in his career, like Tibbs has generally trusted him to close games. So like there is that benefit of the doubt built in, and I'm sure is telling him to shoot him. So I guess
I don't think it's confidence with him. I think it's more of like this weird, like he just got these superpowers and now he can get to the rim very well. And, you know, he sees guys like Brunson flourishing by doing that. And that's this team's identity. So it's more just like balancing the tools in your toolbox. You know, speaking of metaphors that don't make any sense, nobody says that, but
you gotta have equal weight on both sides.
Because it's not like with Deuce, he'll pass up threes and then pass the ball, or dribble and then pass the ball. With IQ, it's not like he's passing up scoring opportunities. He's just moving them inside the arc, which is like, it's cool that you can do that now, but you're a shooter. You got to shoot.
Yeah. And I think to your point on just how like the lack of creativity in that offense, as much as Hartenstein can open it up like quickly as an off-ball threat in like a ultra poor man Steph world, just sprinting around. And I know that's not the Knicks offense, but him doing a little bit of that, like it just creates a cascading effect, and it makes someone like Hartenstein's life so much easier because the lanes to throw those passes in are twice as big when two guys are running with Immanuel Quickley. And right now, there's no reason to, because he doesn't want to shoot at that kind of on. All right, real quick, because I know you got to bounce, but I had to ask you because this is just very up your alley. If we can call it a Christmas present, if you could give one player a dramatic improvement in one realistic skill over the course of the rest of the season, what would you want it to be?
RJ Barrett passing. Super easy decision. Super easy decision. If that would literally... RJ's regression has like changed the outlook of this team from a team building perspective, even though it's only 20 games. Like, we have to see if he continues to be this bad, but like, this is the difference between him being somebody with upside who you build around and invest in, and him being somebody who you invested in on a reasonable contract and they are a stepping stone. All these guys are stepping stones to true stars to some degree, but RJ Barrett was seen as seen as a stepping stone that might turn into a crystal jewel or a crown jewel or something. And now he's just like a guy out there, and that's fine, but that's not what we expected or planned for. So, I mean, I would tie between the defense and the passing, because like he has improved his process offensively over the last week and a half, even if he's still not passing enough. He is passing more, and I think his 2-point shooting is getting a little better, and he's beginning to draw free throws again. And you know, I'm a little worried about his shot, but like he'll settle in at like 35% at some point along the way. But if he became the passer that he could be, that's like that's a unique, there's very few players like that in the NBA. Like, you have guys like Justice Winslow and Josh Hart who are role player wings who can get you 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 assists. But even those guys can't just create attention like RJ can. And that's why it's like, even if the shooting is mediocre, even if the finishing is mediocre, even if the defense is mediocre, if he can be a passer, then all of a sudden he gets easier shots. All of a sudden his impact stats go up. Like, the shooters around him start cooking. The vibes would be good. Like, man, that'd be Prez's utopia.
All right, Prez's utopia. That's a good note to end on. I appreciate all the time, man. Before I let you go, can you just tell everyone one final time where they can find all your work, and they'll know if they're watching on YouTube, but for people listening, where they can find you on Twitter and everything?
Yeah, the popo coming for me right now, apparently.
Yeah. The takes were too hot. Tips is like, we gotta shut it down.
I'm giving away the game plan. You can find me on the Strickland and on Twitter at _Presidente. It is officially draft season on the Strickland. So today, as of recording, which is Thursday the 8th, the first episode of this season of Draft Strickland, featuring Rafael Barlow from NBA Big Board, is out.
And locked on NBA Draft as well. So it's all in the family. Double, dude. This is you're great at this. Double promotion.
Yeah, you know, you gotta get the branding out there. And then we should have our first. So this first episode was a light overview of some of the 2023 draft class, and our first article that we're going to publish is going to be the first part of a two-parter, going over about 30 guys who are really interesting, likely first rounders, possible lottery picks, because there's just that much talent. So I don't know when exactly that's going to come out, but at some point in the next week or two. So I'm really excited for that to come out. So there's just, you know, the players in college who are injured are finally playing, and holiday hoops are upon us. So it's a good time for me. And apparently the Knicks are cooking too. So things are going well. So I'll be around.
All right. I love the optimism. Thanks for coming on. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow with one last podcast episode this week, a recap of the Hornets game with our guy, Ace Zulo, a.k.a. DJ. So tune in for that next time on Locked On Knicks.